Can two wrongs make a right? I made some mistakes in my quilting career, and one day when I was applying fusible to a piece of fabric, I made a big mistake, and I applied the fusible to the front of the fabric instead of to the back. I don't know if you'll be able to see the shininess here, to see that the fusible is attached to the wrong place. And I guess I could try to figure out how to wash that off, but I think it's going to take a lot of work to try to get it removed, since I have already pressed it onto the fabric. And so I pretty much thought that this part of the fabric would be something I would have to throw away, but I hate wasting fabric, so I just kept it there just to think about what to do with it. So that's one of the mistakes that I've made. Let me show you the next one. So this one's not exactly a mistake, but this is some really weird, awkward fabric. It's been cut up into like weird pieces because I was working on fussy cutting for another quilt that I made. And even though the fussy cutting was not a mistake, it does lead to some weird chunks of fabric that would be kind of hard to cut into little pieces because they are such weird shapes. So my idea today is to combine these two things, these two problem fabrics, into something else. Hopefully I can salvage these problem fabrics and see if I can come up with something that will be usable. I got this idea from mixed media artists. Basically what they do is they make a large project of artwork, and then what they do is they cut it up into the size that they want it to be. So instead of making lots of little things, you make one big thing and then cut it up into the size you want. And this is a great way to make multiple things. Like if you wanted to make gifts for your friends, either for holidays or for a retreat, anything like that, you could make multiple things really quickly. And so what kinds of things can you make with this? There are lots of different ideas that you can cut them with. You can make bookmarks, postcards, artist trading cards, little gift tags, little decorations that you put on in the front of cards that you can paste to the front of cards. You can make banners. You can make magnets for your refrigerator, place cards. There's just so many different ways that you can use these little things. You can even attach them as embellishments to your quilts. So there's just so many different ways that you can use these. And they're really quick to make because basically you're making one big thing and just cutting up into usable sizes. You can, if you wanted to, use your masterboard as your background. It's already a work of art on its own, but if you wanted to, you could add a focal point to each of the pieces just to give it that special touch. So in my 15 minutes to quilt today, I'm going to be working on my masterboard. I hope that you sew along with me in this 15 minutes to quilt challenge and enter to win a prize. So to decide on the size of the masterboard, you'll have to decide what kind of size that you want to use for your project and how many of that particular shape that you need. Just so you'll know, you can also use different shapes. So if you wanted to make a postcard as well as a bookmark, you can do that with this too. This is very versatile. But for me, I'm just going to cut it to the size of the problem area of this fabric. This fusible ends here, so I'm just going to cut it here. So the rest of this fabric is still usable for me for other projects. And then for me, the rest of this, there's fusible here. There's this part that's not, doesn't have any fusible, but I think I should still be able to use this the way it is. Yeah, I don't feel like cutting this part off, so I think it'll be fine without the fusible there. And basically my idea is just to fuse something on top. Sorry, I thought that was the thread, but it's just the edge of the fusible. So basically I'm just going to look over to my other fabric to see what the shape exactly is and what to do with it. Maybe what I should do is just cut off the edge here, cut it here, so because all my fussy cut is over here in this section, so I can just cut off here so that I can have the rest of this fabric safe for future use. And here on the selvage, I'll just make as straight a cut as I can from here. And I could have used a rotary cutter for this, but that would involve more setup. Okay. And then the rest of this fabric I can use for a future project also. So this is an African print, and I have made a quilt with this African print I fussy cut, basically I fussy cut a lot of these parts and pieces onto that quilt. So this one I could also fussy cut, or I could just use it the way it is. My plan was just to use it the way it is as much as possible. But I don't know. I'm gonna press this, and I'm not worried about these extra spaces here in the middle because I'm going to put something on top of them. There's actually quite a bit of fabric here. I feel like maybe I should have used a bigger background. Okay. And the beauty of this project is I can cut or keep as much as I want to. So for example, I could cut these into smaller pieces and paste them that way like a collage, or I can just use them as whole as I can. It'd just be completely up to me what it looks like, what I feel like doing today at this moment in time. And I don't have to keep it in the same direction that it was before. I can just move them around in different ways. I have this other piece of fabric that I had used for a different project that has fusible on it. I think I could add that also. So here in this part that doesn't have any fusible, I think this would be a good place to put this. And that way we can make up for the fact that it doesn't have fusible in that section. And when I went through my African fabric, I found these other little pieces that I had available that I had used in other projects, so I could cut the selvage off here. And just find an empty place to put that. And you may not have noticed, you may notice that this is not an exact straight cut, it's going downwards. Here it's going down, it's not a rectangle, it's not a straight cut. It would go up this way, but it's fine. Since it's going to be cut up into smaller pieces, the exact shape of this background fabric really doesn't matter. And I can overlap, this is an overlap, but that's fine. There's little pieces hanging off, so I could add that somewhere else. Maybe here, so that their orange there's a little spot of orange here. And then I also have this fabric that was made from, this is backing fabric for this same quilt, and I can use this somewhere in here also. Not sure, do I want it on the top or the bottom? I think I'm going to use them as separate pieces with this. Cut off the selvage off of this one too. It's not necessary for applique to cut out the selvage, but I think I'd like to do that anyway. So this I think can go underneath this section and serve as a background. Maybe I can put it here underneath all this, underneath the gap to fill up the gap. like that. It's a little peeking through in the back. Oops, no, don't move that again. Something like that. Let's see, what else do we need? We have that yellow fabric. Maybe the yellow can go in the bigger spot. Now keep it over this and under this, so it has a balance of different sections. Do I need to show more of the eye? I'm gonna add some more green at the top of this. Put this underneath too. Okay, I could leave there's some gray that's left over here and down here at the bottom. This is a little bit smaller than what you can, my shape is a little bigger than what the camera can show. Over here there's a gray spot. Do I want gray or do I want a different color? I think I do want some color there. Okay, so I've used up all of this. No, I haven't. Okay, so I could add another orange fabric, another part of the blue here, or I could use this. I think I want to use more of this section, at least in this corner on the right. Take off the batting, trim off the selvage. There's a little cut here, so I'll fix that. Okay, so this I can put here in this corner, underneath that one and above that one. That looks pretty good. And then here, I could add the same. I think I want more of the green. So there's more green here, so I'll just add the plain green. Cut off the selvage. And then I could just put this here in the corner. I can't put it up. I guess I could put it underneath. And move this up. I think this can be moved up to make it fit. Like that. So there, that section is pretty much covered. This section is pretty much covered. This section needs something more up here. This section needs something more up here. And maybe the smaller piece can work there too. the smaller designs. Okay, so there's some batting here that's going to be hard to cut off, so I just, rather than using a seam ripper, I can just cut the whole part off. And then I can just add that underneath. To make this fit. And this is going to be another one of those serendipity things, because depending on where you cut the fabric and the size and shape that you put into it, it's just going to look different from each other. So because this is taking up so much of the space, it will, it's going to really affect how big you cut the shapes, because if you cut the shape big, you're going to wind up with just a postcard with just this part on it, which I think will still look beautiful. But if you cut them into smaller pieces, then you'll just see little sections at a time. So the next step is just to press all of this down. You know, once I make sure that I have all of this in proper order. I'm just pressing one section at a time once I make sure that the fabric is flat enough to be able to fit there. And some of this, because it's fusible, it's fabric on fabric without any fusible underneath it, will not attach. There is a little section that does not have the any cover on it, but I think it's okay to have some gray peeking through. Or I could cover it up either way. Probably could use a little bit of yellow here. This is the only big branch in here. Yeah, I like the yellow. Okay, I've fused as much as I can on this project. There's still parts and pieces that are loose because they're fabric on fabric. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and just sandwich this quilt. I'll find a batting fabric and a backing fabric, and then sandwich it with safety pins, and then I'll quilt it. You'll have to decide what kind of batting to use based on your project. If you're making postcards, you'll want something that has a little bit more structure to it. But for purposes of this demonstration, I can just use whatever I have handy, and this was the perfect size for it. I just had to trim off just a small amount of it. And then I decided to go ahead and use the same fabric as the backing fabric. Since it was here, it just easy for me to make that decision. And so what I'm going to do now is to just sandwich this quilt, and then I'm going to quilt it down. And you can choose pretty much whatever kind of quilting that you want. I recommend that there's a lot of close quilting to it, so you could either just make straight lines. So whatever is easier for you is fine, whether you want a free motion or use straight lines. I think I'm just going to go ahead and make straight lines for this project, just for the demonstration. I think it's nice to be able to see that you don't have to do any fancy quilting to make this project work for you. So I'll go ahead and sandwich this and quilt it for you. I personally don't have any problems with loose pieces like this hanging out on the quilt because I know that I can sew them in place. If you have a problem with that, you can easily attach fusible to the back to make sure that it sticks. You can also use a glue stick if that helps. Basically what I'm going to do is just to pin it down and make sure and just check for it when I'm quilting this quilt. And if it does wind up getting out of place like here, it'll just be the gray that's going to show, and so really it's not going to matter to me at all that there's some gray showing. So either way, it's fine the way it is. To sandwich this quilt, you put the right side of the fabric down so that it will show on the outside, and then you layer it with your batting, and then you layer it with your batting, and then your quilt top goes on top, right side up, and that way you can see both the back and the front the way it is here. I like to have the backing and the batting just a little bit bigger than the quilt top, just to avoid any issues. Sometimes, if it's just a little bit too short, it might move a little bit in your quilting process, and just having that little extra cushion just makes me feel better knowing that if it shrinks a little bit, the quilt top itself will still be completely backed with the backing and the batting. And then basically you would just secure all three of the layers together temporarily with a safety pin. These curved quilting pins actually work better for me than the straight ones do. Although I do use straight pins as well. The curved ones are just more convenient for me because they already have that little bend in it. Just easier to pull through. You want to make sure that you go through all three of the layers with your safety pin. And I do go ahead and close the safety pins at that point because I don't want to be pinched while I'm quilting. And what you want to do is to keep them close enough apart to where all the layers will be secure, but you don't want to put too many safety pins in because that's going to involve taking out a lot of safety pins while you're quilting. So basically I probably do about a hand's width apart. I think that's a pretty good one. If you go a little for here, this particular piece I had to secure because it's not on the, because it doesn't have fusible underneath it. But as you go, you just want to make sure you have enough pins to secure all your pieces in place. But again, not so many that you have to be inconvenienced by having to do a lot of removing of the pins. A lot of where you place the pins and how far apart you are has a lot to do with what your quilting plan is. So for example, if you're planning on making straight lines, you may want to make sure that you put your pins vertically so that you can sew right along next to them, and that way you don't have to take these out as often, and that they won't be in your way while you're quilting. And if you can think through your quilting plan before you put the pins in, that actually helps you a lot, because if you are making straight lines, you can make sure your pins are far enough apart that are in a nice straight row, so that you can just go ahead and just sew right alongside the pins. But if you put them random in like this is good for free motion quilting, so you can just move your way around the pins as you can. You will still have to remove them as you go along, but sometimes if you're somewhere close to a pin, you can just maneuver your way around it and then take the pin out afterwards. If you're worried about making straight lines, you can mark the lines, but I just like to make straight organic lines, which do not have to be completely straight. Basically, I start in the center and then I make lines in the center of that section and then the center of that section until I'm happy with the way. So I'll make here, this is half of the quilt, and then I'll make a center here, and then I'll make a center of this center and of this section, the new section. So basically it's just a matter of keeping your lines proportionate until you are happy with how close together they are. I'll do the rest of this off camera. Just make sure you take the safety pins out as you're sewing, because you do not want them to get in the way of your needle and mess up your timing on your computer. Okay, I've gone ahead and finished quilting this quilt, this masterboard, and I got carried away and I went all sorts of different directions instead of straight lines. And I also went over some of the applique sections, just secured them a little bit to make sure that they stayed, but I didn't do every single section, because what's going to happen now is once I cut it, there'll be extra sections that get loose a little bit. But what I can do is I can secure those sections when I've cut out my shape. either with a satin stitch if I sew all the way around it, or I could do a straight stitch, whatever works for me. I can use pinking shears to avoid having to do the satin stitch. Whatever works for you works fine. You can choose whatever you want to do. So let me try to think about what kind of shape that I do want to make on this, and I don't really know for sure. Let me just trim some of this down so we can make decisions on it. So I'm just making a straight line here. Then again, I can make bookmarks, or I can make ATCs, whatever it is, artist trading cards, whatever it is that I want to do. This section I think would make a good artist trading card. This section looks like maybe it would be a better postcard, maybe? I don't know. Let's just go ahead and just go with the artist trading cards for now. We can do that. It's 2.5 by 3.5, so let's make some 3.5-inch lines real quick here. And it's going to be pretty much serendipity. Okay, I'm just going to cut 3.5-inch sections because that's the size I've decided to make is an artist trading card. And then artist trading cards are 2.5-inch. Length is 2.5 inches, so let me cut that. And you can see just based on where you cut it, what each section is going to look different from each other. And each one is going to be its own work of art. And it's a great way to use up those scraps of fabric and other problems that you might have encountered. This is the batting section, so that's extra. Although I could easily, this is the batting section, so it's extra, but I could easily add some other fabric on here to finish it off so that this part isn't wasted. So these are artist trading cards. Each of these are their own little gift here. You can give them away to your friends. If people don't like this side, they can always just look at the back of the other side. And you can satin stitch them if you feel that it needs that. Another option, this one probably needs to be secured more. Some of this applique is not secured, so you'll have to go through that again. And then, you can embellish it and make each one its own little work of art. I mean, it already is. Each one of these is already a work of art, but there's other ways that you can do to embellish it. So, for example, I have these little, there's a lot of things that you can buy, little doodads you can buy from the store. So if you use beads or charms or lace, crochet doilies, anything that you can use to embellish your little work of art would be fine. Whatever makes you happy. This one could use like a little Japan sign. You can use beads or buttons, or you can also use leftover scraps from what you have. So for example, I had this little piece of fabric that's just hanging out. I could just probably just put this here to help embellish it if I don't think this is exciting enough for me. I can just add to it. So you can, once you've cut this, you can go ahead and add whatever finishing touches that you want to make to this piece. So besides artist trading cards, you can also make bookmarks, postcards, little things that you can attach to your gift cards. And you have, again, 2 choices of which one you want to use. You can make mug rugs. This would also make good mug rugs. Mug rugs can be pretty much a lot of different sizes. So let me try this 5-inch ones. Let's make it a little bit wider than this. Give you a place for a cookie or whatever else you want to have. I think maybe I can just cut this in half. Place over here. I think that's a good size for 2 mug rugs. So there, now you have 2 different size mug rugs. You can cut them together. You can cut them to make them the same size if you want, or just use them the way it is, because I didn't center properly. So this could be a postcard or a mug rug. You could even make placemats if you wanted to make them big enough. You could make bookmarks. This would be a good bookmark. Make those pretty long. Let's see if I can do a better job of finding the center here. Okay, now you have 2 unique and creative bookmarks, and again you can use zigzag or a straight line stitch or whatever it is that you want to do to finish these off. And you can also add any extra fabric if you wanted to make it a little bit more zingy. Just grab some fabric and add it to your project to make it more exciting if you need that. So we've got bookmarks, we've got mug rugs, we've got artist trading cards. Let's see what else we can make with these. You can make a banner. So if you wanted to make banners, you could choose whatever angle that you want to use for your banner. This one. You could measure the angles if you want to make them consistent with each other, or you can just make them free form, whatever works for you. This way. You can just sew them to each other like a banner and have a really nice, fun decoration for your party. I hope that you enjoyed seeing all the different uses that you can make for a masterboard. It's a great way to use up your scraps. And you could secure this with a binding strip, or you can just sew them end to end. Either way, sew them with a ribbon, however you want to make your banner. I hope that this idea of creating a masterboard comes in handy for you when you want a quick project. And I hope that you got a chance to sew along with me today so that you can enter to win prizes. I'm giving away 2 copies of a book that I wrote especially for quilters. It's an idea that I haven't seen before, and I hope that you love it as much as I do. There's 2 ways that you can do that. The first way is just to sew for 15 minutes with me. And if you did sew for 15 minutes today, just leave a comment to let me know what project you worked on today. The second way to win a prize is just to watch my video, and if you did that, then just leave a comment saying something that happened in the video today, and you get another entry in the drawing. I'm really enjoying seeing how much work you're getting done. So many of you are working more than 15 minutes. I'm really happy that you can do that. Don't forget to share your photos on our Facebook page. Thank you for watching. I appreciate all your support, and we'll see you tomorrow.